Hey guys, Mr. Happy here and welcome to my rename series, Final Fantasy Bestiary. Today we're going to be going over the history of the fire god Ifrit. And yes, I know it's Ifrit, but come on, everybody wants to call him Ifrit. Now Ifrit, very common name in terms of Final Fantasy, not really a fire god per se, but it's the best way that we can think to put him, and he has different lore and appearances in different games, which we'll get into. He's also been known as Jin and Iflight. These are usually due to mistranslations or just the games giving him different names. But he's a common summon slash enemy in the Final Fantasy series, and ever since his first appearance, he's pretty much been a staple in the series. It's not a Final Fantasy game without Ifrit. He commonly rivals Shiva in pretty much every game since their opposition is fire and ice. They tend to be either weak to one another or strong against one another. In some games, it's not exactly like this, but for the most part, that's how it works. However, in some games, he seems to have some sort of relationship or previous relationship with Ramuh, or Rama, however it's pronounced. I know someone's going to correct me, as it seems that he tends to react to him in certain games, and it's a little bit interesting, but it's not so interesting that it's like it deserves any more mention than that. Now, while his appearance and lore changes slightly from game to game, and lore changes a little bit more than slightly, trust me, one thing he has in common: he's usually a fiery, beast-like humanoid with two horns, claws, and brown skin. I personally always thought his skin was red, but that's because I'm colorblind. Moving on, his first appearance was in Final Fantasy III, and he's appeared in every single Final Fantasy since then. So, yes, he has become basically one of the main mascots of the game. Now, in Final Fantasy III, which was his first appearance, it was actually probably the most unique appearance he's had, because Ifrit was actually able to heal things in Final Fantasy III. That's right, there were three types of summoning in Final Fantasy. One would cause him to do an AoE heal, one would cause him to do Hellfire, which was not his ultimate move in this game, which was it was just a single target fire damage, and one was Inferno, which is AoE fire damage. Now, after Final Fantasy III, he became sort of a simple type of summon. He wasn't really too unique compared to all the rest of them. He was just kind of the fire guy to go to. Final Fantasy IV, though, he was actually called Jin on the SNES version, and other than that, he pretty much served the same purpose as he did in 3, except with less options. Final Fantasy V was actually a very interesting and probably one of Ifrit's lowest appearances. Now, that's not because he doesn't make an appearance or his appearance is very short-lived. He is obtained as a summon, and you do get to fight him. However, his lore in this game is underwhelming, to say the least. Ifrit was placed in a library, and the reason for that is because his purpose before everything went wrong was to burn books that were possessed by monsters. That's right. Ifrit was a librarian in Final Fantasy V. Moving on, Final Fantasy VI. This is actually an interesting one because Ifrit and Shiva fight together in this. Now, while they're never on the screen at the same time, defeating one or the other will cause the fight to end, and they will join the party. Final Fantasy VII goes back to being an average summon, similar to the way he was in Final Fantasy IV. Of course, he has all of his personal modifiers for Final Fantasy VII, but other than that, nothing too special about him in this game. Final Fantasy VIII was a little bit interesting because he actually talks to the player a little bit when you first encounter him, as he is pretty much the first boss in the game when you go outside. He's the third Guardian Force you run into, and at this point you'll already have Shiva. Now, if you use Shiva against Ifrit in Final Fantasy VIII, he'll actually be kind of like, whoa, I wasn't expecting you to have that. But after that, it's pretty much just an easy fight from there. And if you defeat him without Shiva, he actually commends you on your strength. He's also a level 8 Guardian Force card in the game, for those of you who love the card system in Final Fantasy VIII. Hopefully you got your hands on him at some point. Now, in Final Fantasy IX, he takes on a similar role to Final Fantasy VII, where he's just your average summon again. He's learned through the Topaz Gem, and he becomes more powerful with each Topaz you have in your inventory. Nothing too special. However, moving on to Final Fantasy X, he was a summon that was obtained in the Kilika Temple. Now, this was actually one of my favorite appearances of him, and one of my favorite looks for Ifrit in any of the games. He actually had a few interesting attacks, including the Meteor Strike, which was, let's be honest, anyone who played Final Fantasy X, you loved the Meteor Strike. Of course, he had Hellfire as his ultimate move, and other than that, there wasn't too much to say about him in the initial version of 10. However, in 10.2 and in 10, the international version, he does make recurring appearances. In the international version of Final Fantasy X, he becomes a Dark Aeon, which is a secret boss that the players can fight. And in 10.2, he's simply summoned by Shinyu, I believe the guy's name was, and he is a bad guy. You gotta kill him. You gotta kill Ifrit. Sorry, guys. Final Fantasy XI, he actually had a very deep lore behind him, and it would take ages to go into all that, so I'll give you a very brief overview. He was one of the 8 celestial avatars, but they were also called sleeping gods. There was a celestial avatar / sleeping god of every single element, although the 2 ones, Odin and Alexander, were not considered sleeping gods, essentially. He has some deeper lore, but this actually goes into the entire lore of all of the celestial avatars, and it would take a while to explain it all, to go over it all. Basically, all you need to know is that he hides with his full power form in the Chamber of Fire, and whenever he fights you, he usually fights you with some sort of primal form of him, just an incarnation of his power, not his actual true embodiment. Now, Final Fantasy XI, really great appearance of him, and he actually looks pretty cool to boot, especially when you summon him. Ugh. Always satisfying. Now, in Final Fantasy XII, this was probably the most disappointing appearance Ifrit has had since Final Fantasy V. Ifrit does not even really appear in the game, at least not the Ifrit we know. Ifrit actually appears as an airship in Final Fantasy XII. I know, not too thrilling. And he is actually replaced by the fire summon Belias, I believe, or Belias, or however it's pronounced. I didn't care for him. Ifrit's way cooler. They should have just used him. And other than that, Ifrit's airship, don't really care. He makes an appearance in Revenant Wings, the sequel, but he's a hideous looking guy in Revenant Wings. Trust me, you'd rather he had just not been in the game and remained an airship in just 12. Now, Final Fantasy XIII, he's not a summon in this game, but he does appear as an Eidolon representing the Pulseless Sea. If those of you remember the cutscene, he actually is battling Ramuh, and it's one of the better cutscenes in Final Fantasy XIII, in my opinion. Now, that brings us all to the current day. Now, of course, there are a bunch of different off-paths. I could go into Before Crisis, Crisis Core, Final Fantasy IV Interlude. I could go into all of the offshoots tactics. I could go into Kingdom Hearts. I could go into so many different games. However, we should get into his current day status, which is how he stands in Final Fantasy XIV and A Realm Reborn. His role in both of them are very similar, and it's that he is a primal of the Amul-Jah, if that's how it's pronounced. I'm not exactly sure. And he is summoned to fight against the Garlean Empire as they're invading. Now, Ifrit has a few more interesting details about him. Now, not only can he only be summoned in times of his people's desperation, meaning the Amul-Jah, but he actually feeds off not only human sacrifices, but of the poverty of his race. So as the Amul-Jah become desperate enough and their race is in danger, Ifrit becomes summonable. And this is why we really only see him in 5 years before in 1.0 in Final Fantasy XIV, and why in A Realm Reborn he's returning, because the Garlean Empire was attacking and the Amul-Jah were afraid of being wiped out, essentially, in both of these occasions. The Garlean Empire obviously wants Ifrit gone because his power does rival that of the Empires, and it's interesting to see that the Amul-Jah are willing to kidnap sacrifices for Ifrit. There are some more things about Ifrit, about how his fire actually burns his soul, and that there are a select few who are immune to this effect, but we could get into that at another time, potentially in a Final Fantasy XIV lore video. All you need to know is he's got to go down, you got to take him out, and it's up to you to do it. Also, you will be able to summon Ifrit in a smaller form known as an Eggy when playing as a summoner in Final Fantasy XIV. It's not as impressive as the real Ifrit, but so be it. So anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please like, favorite, subscribe, and share, especially if you have a friend who might be a little bit interested in the history of some of these Final Fantasy creatures, or if you're new to the series altogether. You can check out my Facebook and Twitter, make requests for future Bestiary videos, and you can also ask me regular questions and just have fun with it. Both the Twitter and the Facebook are in the description below. Also, if you'd like to donate to my YouTube channel to improve the quality and ensure that I can keep putting out a steady stream of videos, there's also a donation link in the description. If you need more details about that or the charity that I work with, feel free to send me a message. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, take care.